Yeah. Can you see it?
Hi everyone, welcome to the BrainJuicer webinar. We are just about ready to go.
Are we on? Hello everyone. Afternoon if you're in Europe, morning if you're in the US, and frankly if you're in Asia, you're seriously keen. Now, I'm going to kick off. I'm here with Will Goodhand, our juicy evangelist. Hi Will. What I want to do is just start off with a question. Who has heard of System 1, System 2 thinking? And I think Will is going to launch the poll. This is a first. You see, you have to try something new each time you do these things. Yeah? So who has heard of System 1, System 2 thinking? We just want to get a show of hands, basically. I think it's... we're voting? Yeah, there's voting. This is exciting. Will, this is the first time we've done this. 85% voted. Come on, those of you who've just got your screen open and you're sending email. Now you'd have thought I might be doing this deliberately just to get your attention, but no, it's actually a good way to start, just to kind of get a sense of who's actually heard of System 1, System 2 thinking. All right, Will, how are we doing? What's the vote? What's the verdict?
The vote is 71% no, 29% yes.
Great. Okay. Well, look, for the 71%, I'm going to give you the bluffer's guide to System 1, System 2. And for the other 29%, send in your questions. If I get anything wrong as far as you understand it, let me know. But System 1, System 2 thinking is basically being put forward by Daniel Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman is the only non-economist to ever win the Nobel Prize for Economics. He's a psychologist, and basically it's a model of how our brains work. System 1 thinking is the old reptilian part of the brain, if you like. It's the intuitive, instinctive, emotional brain. System 2 is what we, I suppose, think of more as thinking. It's the frontal lobes. It's the newer part of the brain. It's the bit of the brain that separates humans from animals. It's the bit that we praise. It's the bit that we think is amazing. It's the cognitive, analytical, slow thinking. Yeah, fantastic, and it's rightly praised. The only issue, and this is the important bit for marketing and for advertising, which we're going to talk about specifically, is that we think much less than we think we think. Yeah? System 1 is what we use, most people use most of the time to make most decisions. And System 2, we really don't think and use very much. If we were going to put it in a kind of a computing power analogy, System 1, our intuitive, basically kind of emotional brain, is operating at 11 million bits, yeah, versus 50 bits in System 2. That's how much we use System 1 and how little we use System 2. As Antonio Damasio says, and I love this quote, we're not thinking machines that feel, we're feeling machines that think. And sometimes I think in business, because we get very serious about it and it's large, sums of money we're talking about and business is serious, we kind of make the mistake that it's the other way around. we think that people think much more than they really think, yeah? We're feeling machines that think. And we've got to try and remember that in business. And, you know, all the gamification talk and serious games is a whole nother strand of that, and how playing games and being playful is all part of the human condition, much more than we think, not just for children. Okay, I'm going to illustrate. I'm not sure if anyone can see or tell what the dots on the screen represent. Yeah, it looks like a kind of constellation, looks like a bit of an astronomer's opening of the, you know, the Astro Lab. But if I just show you, we sent an email, by the way, and it's the first link in this, but I will show you here. So if everyone can see my screen, hopefully as soon as you can see the dots moving, it's obvious what it is. It's a walking man. Can you see now? Will's having a look as well. And what's fun about this is you can tell it's a woman or a man or maybe a butch woman. Very heavy. Happy. Yeah? And this is system one working. These are just a few dots. How do we know that that's a walking man? How do we know it's a woman? How do we know it's happy, sad? Our system one brain is evolved to take in all of that sort of information, and it's been evolved to make sure that we spot danger or people, you know, it's why on Oxford Street, the busiest street in the world, people don't actually bump into each other very much. We're not thinking about it. We're just using our system one intuitive brain. Yeah? Okay. So let's go back and do another example. Will, I think you'll have to be my assistant for this one, but you can all play along if you're listening.
Sure.
What I want you to do is think, well, think out loud or say out loud even better. What color are the letters on the screen? Okay, Will.
Red.
All right, and we're going to keep going, so just quickly as we go.
Blue. Blue.
You see.
Green. Blue. Green. Red.
Okay, and hopefully if you've been playing along, listening, you had the same difficulty where the words, the letters arrangement we know so well as a particular color. And then we have to override that with a system to, oh, hang on, I've got to remember the color rather than the letters. And that's what's happening. There's a sort of conflict between the two systems. All right, another example. That's Daniel Kahneman, by the way, down in the right-hand bottom right. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Now, come on, everyone. Have a think. What would it be? I will pause. Now, basically, I suspect that an awful lot of you listening will be going, well, 10 cents. But then I think it's a trick question, so maybe it's not 10 cents. And the mathematicians among you will go, it's 5 cents. Yeah? Because it has to, if it was 10 cents, then it'd be $1.20 in total. And that is system 2 overriding system 1. What Kahneman says is people are not accustomed to thinking hard and are often content to treat a plausible judgment that comes quickly to mind. That's pretty much what we do and how we make decisions most of the time. Yeah, we're really bad at statistics. This is a case in point. There's another example. If you took a piece of paper and you folded it in half 50 times, how thick would the total be? How thick would it be? Now, it's impossible, but if it were possible, we often get answers, well, I don't know, Will, you've heard this one before, it's not even fair to ask, but people say, well, I don't know, it'd be a meter or maybe 100 meters tall, or even a kilometer. It would stretch to the moon and back to the moon. That's how much we don't get. That's system 2. You need system 2 as an override to think these things through. Anyway, system 1, implicit, fast, intuitive, instinctive, emotional. System 2, the frontal lobes, slow, explicit, analytical, learned, propositional, conscious. Yeah, one's unconscious, one's conscious. And what we're going to explore, the reason that this is so critical and crucial a discussion to have in marketing in general and advertising in specific, is because this is how people make decisions. And in market research, what we do is we ask people for their post-rationalization. We're all system 2. Quantitative market research is rooted in system 2, asking people, if you like, to rationalize on scales why they've bought, would they buy, why did you do that, what did you think of this? And actually, most decisions are made system 1. And what's missing is that we need a way of measuring system 1. My metaphor is that system 1 is like the dark matter of marketing. It makes up half or more than half of all of marketing's universe, but we haven't been able to see it or measure it or acknowledge it. And that's what this presentation is going to be about. So at Brainjuicer, we developed a technique of measuring emotion, which was based on the work of this man, Daniel Kahneman. Not Daniel Kahneman, Paul Ekman. Paul Ekman, who spent his life's work traveling around the world with suitcases full of photographs showing tribes in Papua New Guinea pictures of Caucasian students pulling, different emotions. And basically what he did is he worked out that there are 7 emotions that seem to be universally recognizable, universally applied anywhere in the world. And they're sadness, contempt, surprise, anger, disgust, fear, and happiness. Those are the 7. And we've evolved an ability to read those emotions in people's faces because it's part of being a social animal. We have to react to these things. The reason that 5 of them are negative, because we often get asked this, is because in evolutionary terms, you only really need to react when you see a negative face. So it's about survival. Yeah. Surprise, of course, can be either way. It can be surprise good, surprise bad, and happiness. Well, happiness is happiness. You can relax. So what we did is we created. It is a scale, but it's a very intuitive, emotional scale. We put this poor model through hell, 6,500 pictures to get this set of pictures where she had to pull the face, but what we realized in doing it is she had to actually feel the emotion to make it work, to get this scale. And I shouldn't really reveal these stories, but I will. Surprise. Apparently the photographer was slightly desperate to get a good surprise photograph and did drop his trousers. So, there you go. You heard it here. But which of these faces best expresses how you feel about this advert? And we want it to be as instinctive, as intuitive, and quick as possible. And you just click on a face, in this case happiness, and then to what degree did you feel happiness, a little, medium, or a lot, and you just click on the face, and then you try and say why. And sure, the why is a little bit of a post-rationalization of why I picked it, but it seems to be pretty good. Why is measuring emotion so important? And I'm going to share with you some more statistical data from the IPA. But the IPA, the Institute of Practitioners of Advertising, is probably the single best database of advertising effectiveness in the world. It's got about 1,000 case histories that have all been submitted for an effectiveness award. So not a creative award, but an effectiveness award. And they've put forward a very detailed case of how the advert has been effective. Many of them are econometric modeled, so they've proven that it must have been the advertising that created this effect. And it's talking about hard business measures, so profitability related measures of share gain, price increase, elasticity, etc. Yeah, so, and what they found, you can see on this chart, is that emotional advertising, is more effective and more profitable than rational campaigns, even in so-called rational categories. The most effective adverts have little or no rational content. So this is the first sort of controversial, challenging, perhaps piece of a statement, and there are going to be some more coming. So sit in, hold on to your hats, because it gets interesting from now on. Now, you won't be able to see anything but a blank screen on mine, but this is the Cadbury Gorilla advert, and I don't know, Will's going to send you the link to this, and if you got the email from last night, you'll be able to watch it. I mean, many of you will hopefully know the Cadbury Gorilla advert, but I think it's worth watching it again to really, really make the point. So we'll just, you know, and I think while you're watching it, I'll show you on the screen here, if you can. I'm not sure, you won't be able to see both at the same time because everyone will be online. But basically, it failed dismally on any of the conventional measures of advertising. How easy to understand, how relevant, how persuasive, how much it told you, yeah? And so any pretest, whether it's, you know, Millward Brown or Ipsos, in fact, this advert was tested by Millward Brown. And although it got very high engagement scores, it was a disaster in terms of message. There was no message. There's no linkage to chocolate. And there was, the link to the brand was also very poor. And if we actually think about the model that everybody assumes and uses as the underpinning of communication theory, it is propositional based. It is basically persuasion based. My chocolate biscuit is better than your chocolate biscuit because. My washing powder is better than yours because. You know, reasons to believe and all of that. It's like the fist of a brand proposition wrapped in the velvet glove of emotion. So emotion plays a role in this theory, but only as a carrier for the brand proposition, yeah? And what I'm going to do is challenge that notion as, if you like, the way to make the very best, most effective advertising. Because when you take the Cadbury Gorilla and you measure it emotionally, how do you feel about it? Maybe you felt surprised at a gorilla playing the drums. To what degree did you feel surprised? Yep, pretty damn surprised. And why? Well, it's not what you expect. You end up with this. This is the emotions from the bottom: surprise, dark green; happiness, light green; neutral, very little neutrality. You'll see in a minute that other adverts get a lot more neutral. And then the negative emotions piled on the top. On the right-hand side, the reasons why. So the people who said, I feel contemptuous of this advert. I just can't see what is the connection between Phil Collins, a gorilla, and chocolate. Yeah, you know, it's fair enough, but luckily only 5% of people. Whereas most, it's just excellent, it's brilliant, it makes me laugh, it's clever, it's easy to remember, it's the best ad around, I love it. Yeah, that's the sort of, you know, it's bizarre, it's unique, it makes you want to watch it again and again and again. But really, it's got no message, it has no content. And that's the challenging thing. And I have heard on many, many occasions people stand up in a conference or say in a conference that the Cadbury Gorilla advert had no effect on sales. I've heard it, they say. I mean, the trouble with advertising discussions is they are the most anecdotal discussions in marketing. And the reason that the IPA database is invaluable is it is incredibly hard to win a prize, and everything has to be checked. And the Cadbury Gorilla campaign over on the right-hand side, yeah, the master brand payback was 171% versus previous campaigns. The ROI was £4.88 for every pound spent. That is phenomenal ROI, and it hardened price elasticity by 27%. Fact. The chairman of Cadbury is on record as saying this is the single most effective advert ever we've made, and it saved the company because they'd had a salmonella crisis the year before, and it just brought the goodwill back to the brand. And on conventional measures, and in fact, Millward Brown, it failed, and it was not recommended. On emotional measures, System 1, it's phenomenal. one of the best scores we've seen. Yeah. Let's take another example. I know they're extreme. Now, this is just to say to you, this is the Cadbury Gorilla, where we ask people to watch it again, and when you feel emotional, just move the mouse, the film stops, and you say what emotion you're feeling and why. But if I fast forward, if you like, you can then see the shape of the emotional as you go through the Cadbury Gorilla advert. It builds as you're wondering whether this is a real gorilla or not a real gorilla, and then there's a second big build, if you like, when you see that it's a gorilla playing the drums, and the negatives are there at the top, but the positives are much better. Let's take another example, which is the Heineken walk-in fridge. And again, if you've got the link, I think Will's sending you the link. Have a quick look at the Heineken walk-in fridge, and I'll put up on screen here again the conventional measures of the walk-in fridge. Hopefully you've got to the screaming bit of the guys by now. And it's a great ad, it's wonderful. I thought they were very brave, by the way. In the UK, they ran that ad in Dutch. I think it must be the first Dutch commercial possibly ever on British TV. They didn't dub it, they didn't do anything, and I think that was brave. Anyway, as you can see, it did badly on conventional measures again. How did it do when it comes to face trace, emotion, when you measure it emotionally? Really, really well. It's surprise, it's happiness, it made me laugh, it was stereotypical but it was amusing, it was funny, etc., etc. Yeah? And if you put those two things together, again, you would not have progressed this advert on conventional measures, but on emotion, it's tremendous. It's really powerful. And again, if we look at the face tracing, you can see the emotion building, the positive emotions building throughout the commercial. Now, okay, at this point, you're probably thinking, well, yeah, but they're the exceptions, and maybe it is new news to hear that not only are they massively creative, and they've won a lot of creative awards, but they are significantly commercially successful, hard business measures. And when you look at the whole benchmark of ads that we've tested, you can see that Gorilla and Walk-in Fridge are right at the sort of, pretty much at the top end of things that we've tested. And just another measure for you, in terms of virality, they also are the ads that get shared online. The correlation with emotional intensity and YouTube hits is very strong. Yeah, and it's not surprising. It's this sort of emotionally engaging, spots that are going to get shared. I don't know if anyone listening has seen the T-Mobile's latest royal wedding spoof. And it's the royals lookalikes coming in and dancing down the aisle. We'll send it out with this later on. If anyone hasn't seen it, it's great. It's very funny, and it will become like the Gorilla, one of the viral campaigns. All right. Here is a statistic that I really think is worth sharing. So of the IPA database, the cases that had favorable pre-testing results did significantly worse than those that were not tested. Now look, if market research is making a contribution and pre-testing is about improving advertising, there's something going wrong here when marketing directors know that when they've got one of those ads that's special, that's rare, that could be amazing, let's not pre-test it. And the ones that are pre-tested are not doing as well as the others. And maybe the dirty little secret of traditional information-based ad pre-testing is it's actually making things worse. And what I hope I'm doing in this webinar is giving you the model to explain what's going on. System 1, System 2. System 1 advertising, Cadbury Gorilla, Evian babies, Walk-in Fridge, T-Mobile, royal weddings. These are pure System 1 emotion. They're almost content-less. There's no message. You have to work really hard to extract a brand message. And they don't get measured very well by current pretesting because current pretesting is rooted in the world of System 2. It is a persuasion, cognitive-based model. Okay? And I'm going to show you some very interesting data. And the question is, well, I could imagine that this is true, you know, that System 1 can work commercially for alcohol, soft drinks, perfume, things that somehow seem perhaps easier, more trivial, or fashion. But what about cars, and what about education, what about financial services, which should be much more serious, you know, much more, well, we did a very large-scale study with the IPA, where we took 6 categories, including cars. And what they did is they gave us, we didn't know which was which, but in each of the categories there was one ad that was hugely successful. I mean, big, massive business effects, you know, those rare ones that make a brand famous. An ad that was medium, and an ad that there wasn't much effect. Now remember, all of the ads in the IPA database are supposed to be pretty good. They've been submitted for an award. So even the worst ones here are probably better than the majority of ads. But it's still like the torture test of what's really going on and what type of advertising really delivers the results. So here are the results. And I think you'll find, you should find this shocking. If you don't, then I don't think you've done enough ad testing and had enough discussion, because I'm gonna pull it all up on the screen. The best 9 adverts, and these are, you know, those rare huge successes, are massively more correlated with emotion. They are successful. You get more business effects with emotion, measuring it emotionally, than with the traditional measures of pre-testing, which are better correlated with the bottom 9 ads. This is System 1 versus System 2. You can get a positive return on investment using System 2 advertising. You know, classic Procter & Gamble advertising, you know, Persil. It's not that it's terrible. It's not that it can't give you a benefit. It's just that the benefit is more limited than System 1 advertising. That can make your brand famous, and it can move the needle massively more. That's the point. Same data presented in terms of efficiency, emotion into action, measuring things emotionally, or frankly adverts rather that use emotion to convey, to touch people, massively more efficient than using the other measures. You have to spend a lot of money doing System 2 advertising. All right. So here's a little scale for you, a bit like, you know, films are rated on a 5-star. I think advertising works in the same way. If you've got a 1-star straight-to-video ad, it basically will cost you more money to make and air than you get back in sales. Still probably true of a 2-star pedestrian advert. It's only once you get to a 3-star that you're starting to actually get a positive return on ROI. A must-see 4-star, you're actually going to get profit and share gain, and a blockbuster, you know, not only are you going to get profit, share gain, reduction in price sensitivity, but also it's probably going to go viral, and then you get an amplified effect. So let's have a look at the Cadbury Gorilla. It's a 5-star ad, and this rating, by the way, is calculated by a combination of the emotional metrics, the emotion that it scores, together with, and this hopefully will be the second shock that I share with you, with if you score highly on message, yeah, if you measure and people say, oh yes, I got the message loud and clear, that is a negatively correlated with commercial return, okay? So it actually restricts you. If you could imagine 2 circles on this chart, System 2 cognitive persuasion-based advertising is a circle which starts over on the left and goes up to probably crossing the 80, top 70s, 80s mark. That is the maximum you can achieve with a message-based persuasion campaign. So you can get an ROI, a positive one, but it's limited. System 1, emotional, instinctive, intuitive advertising, is basically a circle which starts over on the right-hand side, and just because it's emotional doesn't mean it will be successful, but it probably goes from the right-hand side down to 70. So if you really did a bland version, it's not very good. And I hope that it's obvious that the only reason you would ever do System 2 advertising and use System 2 pre-testing to tell you whether it's any good is if your brand leader, you are already top of the pile and you don't need to transform anything, and you're more interested in basically lowering risk of making a really bad ad and that you want a positive ROI. If you are a challenger brand or you're a new brand, the only thing surely you must do is make your brand famous, and System 1 emotional advertising has got to be the way to go. Case studies. I'm going to share with you, because I know time is moving on. This was an interesting one, Tropicana. So we tested 2 Tropicana adverts for Pepsi. And what I'm going to do is show you, we've actually put the links, but I think you may have to have a look at them later. There were 2. Based on conventional measures, there were 2. The first one, which is ad A, was Breakfast in America, and it was scenes of New York breakfast scenes, classic scenes. Really no message about Tropicana other than Tropicana's part of breakfast. Ad B was a slightly more, it was still quite good, but it was people walking along the streets, and there were orange trees in the streets, and people were picking oranges off the tree, and it was about freshness, so it had much more message to it. When we measured it emotionally, so when you measure it conventionally, the second ad, the slightly more message-based one, was stronger. When you measured it emotionally, actually Breakfast in New York was stronger, and we have the ROI from Pepsi. And indeed, Breakfast in New York was £1.83 for every pound spent versus £1.73 for every pound spent on the other advert. And so if you then put them on the 5-star rating, they're both very good ads, but it's the Breakfast in New York that's the 5-star one. Another example. And this has come from, again, the IPA database, and we worked with the clients so that they shared a second advert that they had ROI for. But there were 2 adverts for a cheese, yeah? And one of them you can see is a 4-star, and it was pure emotion. It's beautiful. It's all about cheese on toast, and it's very moving. The other ad was pretty good, but it was much more message-based, and it was, and you can see the return on investment, the difference that it makes in terms of return on investment. All right, finally, and deliberately, I just want to share with you an example, and we do all of the ad testing for HSBC, and they've been kind enough to let us share this. And this is perhaps more real. I mean, we go from Cadbury and Heineken, which are rare, through Tropicana, which is still very good, and then here we are in the world of financial services, and immediately you can see a lot more neutrality, And the problem with neutral, by the way, is neutral is the worst score you can get. It's worse than the negatives, because if you feel nothing, you do nothing. And this is an advert where we at least help them to go from something that was seriously neutral to something that was slightly less neutral and more positive. And the way that that actually worked is when you did the face tracing, you could actually tell that people were basically, I don't believe they're listening. The actor's smug. I'm being patronized. It's pretentious, and there was some negatives. We helped them, kind of get the casting better, get the script, sharper, and you can see there's much more clearly happiness and surprise coming through. I mean, still a lot of neutrality, okay? So, this is, not a 5-star ad by any means, but if you put it in perspective, at least we managed to take it from a, below average performing, emotionally, commercial, to one that is at least average and likely to give a positive return on investment, yeah? So this is probably a 3-star advert. Last thing to say, music. It won't come as a surprise to anyone. Music is pure emotion. The role of music in adverts is critical. And normally it just gets slapped on by the ad agency because someone is promoting a particular band. Well, this is an interesting case in point. These are 3 scores based on exactly the same advert, same footage, just with 3 different tracks. One was a rather simple jingle, one was a well-known piece of music, and the last one, the best one on the right, was actually created for this advert, which, as you can see, was already a good emotionally based charged advert, and it made it not just good, but great. And we're waiting to try and get the results, in-market results from this. But anyway, music is much more critical than I think it is normally acknowledged and worked on. There we are. There endeth the webinar. Will's cracking into action. Questions. Fire off your questions. I don't know if people have been sending them in. I always forget to say at the beginning, fire in your questions, as we're doing it. But there's time now.
Great. Well, Drew, thanks very much. 2 questions while we were rolling there. The first of which was saying, please do send me a copy of the webinar deck, and we are indeed going to distribute that afterwards, so thank you for that. But also, thank you, exclamation mark. I'm also wondering whether you've compared emotion into action scoring with neuroscientific measurements.
Yeah, we have, it's sort of hot off the press, and so I haven't included it in here, but we will do once it's been. We basically wanted to check that putting someone inside a CAT scan, wiring them all up, all that sort of stuff, correlated with people clicking on the faces, and it does. Okay, so broadly the answer is you get the same result. The difference is that the 22-point scale of which emotion is much, much more sensitive as a measure, together with people giving you the reasons why. So neuroscience is impressive almost in its gadgetry, but actually it's quite a crude measure. Positive, negative, fight or flight. So whether it's galvanic skin response or whether it's brain, kind of blood surges, actually it's much cruder as a measure, but broadly it is in line with what we find. But 7 emotions times 3 plus neutral, 22-point scale, much more sensitive. And of course you've got the reasons why, because with the neuroscience you don't know why. All you know is people are feeling something or not feeling something. And I think the second one is obvious. It's not scalable. It's not a very good way. I mean, we can deploy this emotional ad test in 20 countries in the world for HSBC because it's a global ad and get the results back in, 2 weeks' time. You can't do that with neuroscience. And so I think neuroscience has a role to play in verification because it's another way of building the case that emotion matters. But at the moment, I don't think it's a credible alternative as an actual research, scalable research method. I'm just trying to be controversial this afternoon.
Okay, great stuff. We've got some wonderful questions coming in, folks. So thank you very much. I'll take the sort of broadest first, and then kind of loop back to the ones that kind of come to working this through the organisation. So the first one we have then: how do ads that elicit negative emotions like fear or anxiety perform? And what about the social nature of emotion? How people think a product will cause others to perceive them? How does that figure in all of this, John?
So, negative emotions, much better than neutral. So just as a hierarchy of emotion correlated with business effect, or effect, neutral is the worst. Negative emotions are still positive compared to neutral. Surprise, and then happiness generally is most correlated with business effect. And within happiness, Ekman talks about 12 different types of happiness, from ecstasy, pride, schadenfreude, joy, and those actually have a ranking as well. So that's one answer, and it's probably the expected answer. The other, of course, is when it comes to charity advertising or government, kind of social good advertising like drink driving or anti-smoking, it's easy to suddenly think, oh yeah, of course, the negative emotions could actually be the ones that are appropriate to the effect that you're trying to put into place. So it could be to scare people, it could be to make them angry. And I always think a really good example of this, I mean, Ekman is very precise about what each emotion elicits from human beings. So when we're sad, what it does is we ourselves are very passive. It's depression. If you think of depression, it's very, we're sad and we're inactive. But what sadness does is it draws others close to us. It encourages others to help us. Anger is a much more active negative emotion. And actually, for those that, kind of remember, what Bob Geldof, Saint Bob, did was he managed to change a general feeling of sadness about Africa and starvation into anger. He actually he activated people by using anger and getting people to share anger. The social dimension, to the second part of your question, I think is relevant. There was a quote, there was a great paper 15 years ago that said, when it comes to advertising, it is not what advertising does to us, it's what we do with advertising that matters. And I think there is a social dimension. It's what is the purpose of this? And in the modern world where we can fire it around on email and make it viral, I think it's becoming more obvious that there is a social dimension to emotional-based advertising.
Great, thanks, John. Okay, lovely question from Betty here. Do you find that ads that are based purely on emotion work after more traditional advertising? Okay, the product or the brand is known to viewers, then you see something more emotional. If the Gorilla ad was the company's first ever ad, would it have been so effective?
It seems plausible, doesn't it? I remember Daniel Kahneman, we always take a plausible answer generally. It seems plausible that that might be true. I know the brand and now I see a really funny ad for it. However, the evidence, if you remember the adverts in your childhood or from your childhood that are the famous ads, they pretty much launched the brands. Yeah? So the Andrex puppy was, as far as I know, Andrex toilet paper's first advert. The Martians, the Smash Martians, I believe, launched Smash. Shake and Vac, the famous silly dance, Shake and Vac, launched that. Now, it doesn't have to be always the first ad, but frankly, Cornetto, singing One Cornetto. I challenge anyone to tell me an advert for Cornetto before that advert. They wouldn't. It's the only one you ever remember. The point, I think, about message-based advertising is it's utterly, really forgettable. You just don't remember it. The ads that we remember are the ones that touch us emotionally, and they are the ones that make the brand famous. And although it seems plausible that a sensible message-based advert is required at some point, the reason it's not true, the reason that we know what brand a famous ad is for, and we find out all the information we need to find out about that brand after we've been moved by it, is because human beings are message machines. We search for messages, for meaning, sorry, I should say meaning machines. You look at the clouds and we see shapes in the clouds, tea leaves, astrology. We are always looking for meaning from things that move us. And that's why you don't need to do it all in an advert. People will discover what it means once they've been moved. Move people first. Make people feel, because human beings are feeling machines that think.
Wonderful. Okay, Sandra, thanks very much for your question. It will be hard to convince my company to move away from the old standard of copy testing. Your cases are compelling. I'll be asked if these are just cherry-picked examples. How many ads do you have in your database, and how many years have you been doing this?
Good question. That's why the IPA database, which is 25 years of effectiveness campaigns, 1,000 case studies, is what we are using as the primary source, if you like, across categories. And what we've promised ourselves is, because all conversation about advertising is so anecdotal, you know, one person can literally stand up and say the Cadbury Gorilla campaign was the most successful ever, and in the same breath someone will stand up and say, I heard that it did nothing. Because that's true, we are only ever going to share hard data. As much as you can ever do it, we're going to always and only share where we have hard data, and we're going to keep the claims of what we're saying to the hard data. And that's why in here you've actually got, you know, how emotion ranks against the classic measures from the IPA database. We've done another big experiment with the CASIES, which is the Canadian equivalent of the IPA, and we've basically got the same result. So it's not just English UK advertising, which we heard from one client, you know, who just dismissed it, going, oh, well, that's just the UK. No, sorry, you know, it's Canadian, so maybe Canada's the same as the UK. The problem, I'm afraid, is that the US equivalent, which is the EFFIES, are not really very robust. They're more of a creative award than they are a genuine effectiveness, econometric modeled effectiveness award. And so what we're now doing is we're going and talking to the big clients and saying, look, you give us your data, you give us, you know, access, and we will, you know, we will do the analysis to see, you know, whether it's true for you as well. And that's what we just did with the dairy company, you know, who were struggling with the kind of classic pre-testing methods, and, you know, we're getting some odd results. So yeah, we're going to try and stick to hard fact wherever we can.
Great. Lovely questions coming in. Some quite a few, so I'm going to try and bundle them up. So two, John, from Letitia. Thank you for these. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. Aren't there emotional ads that fail on ROI? If you don't measure, for instance, brand link, don't you run the risk of creating just a fun YouTube ad with no effect on the brand? And did you test this on any ads that have been proved to be unsuccessful?
Okay. I think it is possible for emotional System 1 adverts to have a negative ROI, but it's pretty hard. Unlike System 2 ads, where it's the opposite. It's easy to bore people completely into neutrality and achieve nothing, and it's more difficult to actually engage them enough to get the message through. So it's hard. And yes, we have tested adverts for clients which are definitely System 1 emotional ads, but there's too much neutral. And so, you know, what you do is you help them make sure that they actually evoke a lot more emotion in order to make it a positive ROI. So I guess that answers also some of the second question, where, you know, yes, we are testing ads that are not, you know, being that successful, mainly by doing them as a pre-test, I'm afraid, and then sometimes they get launched anyway, and they're not very successful. Because, you know, people don't always follow the advice. And what I'm hoping is that when we get access to the client's database, where it's like all their adverts, you know, if it was Procter & Gamble, who are very interested in this, in experimenting, that's when we're going to get the whole range from their most successful commercially to their least successful, and I think we're going to get an even more dramatic picture.
Lovely. Okay. Penultimate question then, taking from Joseph and Eric. Firstly, do you have to link the emotion to a specific brand? Asks Eric. Could Gorilla work also, for example, for Ford? And Joseph says, can this method of measuring emotion be done on packaging and products, not just advertising?
Let's do the second one first. Yes, we use this method to test how people feel about packaging, about insights, about politicians, about anything. So it's just a way of measuring people's emotional reaction to any stimulus, any stimulus. And we've done it actually on even food products, where people are tasting products. And now, the first bit of the question, which is, kind of, could it be any brand? Are you ready for the third controversial yes? Yes, it could. And that is seriously challenging, isn't it, in marketing terms? We have all been taught 101 marketing that brands are unique and it's the unique proposition of a brand. And somehow the idea that the Cadbury Gorilla thing could have been done for certainly another chocolate bar or even for another category, I know, because I've now presented this enough, that the creative team that came up with that idea was a Brazilian team, and they tried to sell it to 3 other clients before it was sold and done for Cadbury. Now this is really challenging, isn't it, from a marketing point of view? But I'll give you the reason why it works is because once it's been done, and once I see it associated with Cadbury, it is forever Cadbury's. That's the point. You think about the Heineken walk-in fridge. That could have been any beer. It really could have been any beer. But now that it's Heineken, it's always Heineken. And if anyone else does it, if Carlsberg tried to do that, then they're just advertising Heineken. The Andrex puppy, could have been for any toilet paper, but it's not. It's for Andrex. And I think what we have to acknowledge is a brand is the sum of the emotion created by the associations with that brand. That is what a brand is. And famous advertising creates that emotion and those associations to the brand. And it's who does it that matters, rather than it having to represent some innate truth about the brand. Yeah, and that I know is controversial because it's not what we've been brought up and taught. But hopefully that does make some sense.
And finally then, 2 points from Mike and 1 from Marie. Mike, is it a one-hit wonder tactic? Cadbury Trucks resonated far less. T-Mobile maybe feels like the effect is wearing off despite the royal wedding. And does emotion work in varying degrees, or are there special approaches across different channels? That's Mike. And Marie says, when you test the client database, do you feel comfortable testing old ads that have already been aired? Can you be confident that that's comparable with pre-testing ads?
Well, let's do the longevity thing. PG Chimps in the UK, Andrex Puppy, there are campaign ideas that have run for decades. Now, maybe that's a failure of imagination, or maybe it's an incredible valuing of something massively important, which is all too easy to throw away. People change marketing jobs every 3 years. The new marketing director needs to make an impact, and things get thrown away. Now, we tested the Cadbury trucks, and we tested the Cadbury eyebrows. The Cadbury trucks just wasn't very good. Wasn't very emotional, I'm afraid. It was neutral. It was just acres of neutrality, not very good. And I think, basically, if you lock onto a property, it probably has much more longevity than any of us think and would perhaps care to, to think about. So, and even if it doesn't, the ad that everyone remembers was the one that made it famous. I don't know how much advertising Walls Cornetto has done since the famous Venetian gondola singing, but I don't remember any of it, really. And that's the point. You can then waste a huge amount of money trying to move the campaign on, and people just ignore it. It's just neutral. So I don't know, yeah, so I don't think it's necessarily just a one-off gimmick. I think it's what makes a brand famous. It's that important.
Great. Well, look, thanks very much, everyone, for a great bunch of really intelligent and emotional questions. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. See you soon. Great. Thanks, everyone.